Do you believe that everyone has a story? Do you want to know about the passions and the stories that drive people to do the things that they do? Maybe you have a vision that intrigues you and you want a little inspiration. If you want to learn about the interesting journeys that people are taking, then you've come to the right place. Get ready to be informed and amused in all aspects of life and the crazy places it takes us. Hot Water 911 brings you Going Home with Tony. And now, here is your host, Tony Scimeca.
Well, thank you, Claudia, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Did you know that Thanksgiving falls on a Thursday this year?
I know. It's always confusing because I'm never quite sure.
Because that is a standing joke.
Between us.
I always forget that Thanksgiving is on a Thursday, and I always tell Claudia, I said, I think it's on a Thursday this year. And she says, because it's always on a Thursday.
It's one of the easy ones to remember.
Okay, so what do I smell?
I think you smell scones and tea.
And turkey?
Oh, and turkey.
Wait a minute. Did you turn on the oven?
I forgot.
Oh, my gosh. All right, we'll be right back. We're going to go turn on the oven. But in the meantime, we are in Osseo, Wisconsin, which is between Pigeon Run or Pigeon
Falls.
Pigeon Falls and what's the next town over?
Eau
Claire. Okay, so we're with Inga Witscher and her dad, Rick Witscher, and we are on the farm of St. Isidore's Mead. So these are all words that I'm still learning how to pronounce, so if I make a few mistakes along the way, you'll understand why.
We won't hold it against you.
Where are we? We're in western Wisconsin?
Western Wisconsin.
And we're kind of like parallel with Minneapolis?
A little bit, yeah. The closest town to us is Eau Claire, which is a little college town, and we're kind of out in the middle of farm country here.
We are, and it's beautiful country.
It is beautiful.
It's beautiful rolling hills. Inga Witscher is the star of Wisconsin Public Television, and she has a show called Around the Farm Table. So the show is a great show, and it's been in production now since for how long?
We just wrapped up our third season.
Wow.
That's
so
awesome.
Quite a few, and before that we were doing some shorts and things like that. So it's kind of been a couple of years.
So you
now.
are a Renaissance woman.
You are a Renaissance woman.
I mean, from farming to chef to television talk show host.
I think I'm just a confused woman.
Or not knowing what you want to do when you grow up. Well, look out, Martha Stewart, because we have the real thing here. Inga, give us the kind of Reader's Digest version of what got you here, and don't say a John Deere tractor.
So I grew up in Washington State on my family's dairy farm, and it was a lovely way to grow up, and I got to experience the best of dairy farming. I wanted nothing to do with it as I got older. I really wanted to be a hairdresser more than anything in the whole world, and just wear makeup all the time and walk around on high heels.
I can see how those two things would go
Absolutely,
together.
Yeah.
I mean, you are working with women right now.
Yeah, every day, yeah. Right. And they have pretty eyelashes.
Yes,
so
right.
That makes a difference. So when I was 18, I moved with my family to Virginia, and I started making cheese there on a farm that my dad was developing, and thought that was kind of interesting. My parents ended up moving to Wisconsin to meet up with my brother and his kids up here. I stayed in Virginia for a few years, and I was doing gardening. I was doing vegetable gardening for people with big estates, and I was, doing all their growing their food, and it was really wonderful. It was a great thing to do.
All organic?
All organic. Mm-hmm. But I was kind of getting a little burnt out because I wanted to have some space of my own to grow my own food, and I really was interested in vegetables. I started getting interested in vegetables because of Seed Savers Exchange and all these different varieties of carrots and tomatoes and all this stuff. So my parents had purchased this little 30-acre farm that we're on today, and my dad said, "Hey, why don't you come up and buy cows and start dairy farming?" And I'm like, "Why would I ever do that, Dad? Like, that just doesn't even make sense at all." But he says, "Hey, you can cash flow a vegetable operation with the cows.
Right.
And just come on up here, see if you can get a loan through the Farm Service Agency, and just give it a try." And I was at a point in my life where I needed to do something. So I drove.
How old were you at the time?
24.
I could see that would be a crossroads.
Yeah.
Most kids are still they're living in their parents' basement, and you're starting a dairy farm.
Well, I moved back into my parents' house. So I drove up here, and I had no money. I maybe had like $10.
Okay.
Like that's
wow.
no money. So I marched down to the farm service agency and I filled out this paperwork and I had like a cute little cocktail dress on and I was just all being like, they're never going to give me any money. But I was doing it just to humor my father.
Right.
And a few days later I got a call and they said, congratulations, you've been approved for your loan because you're socially disadvantaged. I said,
The $10 worked for you?
Yeah. Because I was a woman. Because they have
It wasn't the cocktail dress?
It wasn't the cocktail
Oh, and
dress.
it wasn't the $10. It was that you're a woman. We are socially disadvantaged.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Well, I can throw a heck of a cocktail party, so I'm not sure that...
I'll show you socially disadvantaged.
Socially disadvantaged.
But I couldn't believe this.
Wow.
I was like, I have no experience. This is my government giving me money, and this is the last.
Now you didn't
person
even know what to
giving me
do.
money I had no idea.
Welcome to Wisconsin.
Yeah, it was terrible. So then I had to go out and buy cows, and I bought, I think, 40 cows. And
Oh, you had that many at first?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, my dad, luckily, he was here to mentor me, and he grew up farming, and his father farmed, and his father farmed before him. So I had a good basis for dairy farming, but I wouldn't.
And some of the lessons that you had as a little girl, some must have stuck with you a little bit.
Well, it's funny. I think I was talking to a friend of mine who also farms, and he says, sometimes when I'm stuck with trying to figure out a solution to a problem, I can kind of feel that, like, if I'm still, I feel like my generations of my family are coming through and speaking to me
I like that.
and helping me solve that problem.
Right.
And I experience that as well, and just kind of like, why do I know this information?
Right.
Or
where is this coming from?
Yeah, so I think it's just part of my DNA.
Oh, I love
being
that.
passed down. But the first milking was horrible. My dad broke his ribs. He broke toes. I was just sobbing. It was the worst experience of my life. It took us 8 hours, where it should have taken us like 45 minutes.
And you milk by hand?
No, we had a pipeline. I had a pipeline at the time,
Okay.
so I have units, and I still milk with units now, but it's just a different system. And I thought this was the worst mistake I've ever made in my life. But then
Tears? Were there some tears?
It was, well, my dad has great advice for me. He says, you can always cry, you can cuss, you can freak out, but you can't do any of that until you're back inside the house and everything is finished.
Right.
And so I
think that's good advice, actually.
Yeah.
Power through it,
It's great. Yeah,
and
it's
then
great.
have your meltdown.
Start crying when you're drinking your martini in front of the fireplace.
And we've seen your show, and you make some very nice
The
martinis.
plum martini was...
Yes, we watched the show with Cece, your cousin, and you had some very nice summertime cocktails.
I'm a big fan of the cocktail.
So
It's the key to dairy farming.
It is the
so not only do you have happy cows, you have happy farmers.
Yes, absolutely.
So Rick, you're a fourth generation farmer?
That's correct.
Oh my gosh! And how did was it an easy sell for your dad to get you to drink the milk and stay in dairy farming?
Oh, yeah.
Or was it a similar story to Inga?
It was. I had left the farm for a few years. I traveled. Let me move in a little closer. I was a comedian for 8 years, but
I can see that connection.
I found out I wasn't funny about the 7th year I was a comedian, so I had to quit.
So the first 6 years they were lying to you?
Yes.
I see.
Yeah. So I had to quit.
That's awesome.
But I didn't like traveling, and I started having children, and I went back to the farm and started.
So this is a family that is irresponsible, unrealistic,
That's our favorite kind of family, though.
and has no sense of good choice.
What you're supposed to be
What
doing.
you're supposed to be doing. Is that a fair statement,
It's
Inga?
correct.
Okay, so so you've done a lot of things against the grain, so to speak, but I think that's what makes you so interesting, is because it's so easy to do things the status quo.
Well, I think it's what makes life interesting too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's figuring things out and doing things differently.
Absolutely.
It's exciting.
So I have a question. What was the second day like? So now you had this horrible, not maybe literally, but you had this really hard experience, and you had to wake up the next morning, literally or figuratively, kind of wake up to a new career. How was it then moving forward?
I absolutely fell in love with dairy farming. There was something about being in the barn that next morning. I can still remember it was this time of the year, and it was kind of one of these warmer fall days, and the sunlight's coming in the barn, and we had all this beautiful straw down, and we'd gotten through that first thing, which was, for me, it was like a major thing in my life. I thought,
Huge
if I
step.
can get through that, I can probably do anything. And the second day, I fell in love with milking. I felt the sounds that I was hearing again from my youth, and just the interacting with the animals. And I thought, You know when you like maybe you find your mate or you find that thing in your life
And
you're
you
like,
just know.
You just know, and it's like, oh, that's what's been missing.
Isn't this awesome?
And
I just got chills. That's
Yeah.
At
awesome.
24 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like that's what it like that's and now it's like that's who I am. I'm a dairy farmer. Like I can't ever stop dairy
Are
farming.
you happy every day? Well, that was maybe hard to say every day, but
Especially
you know,
today.
with us.
Of course.
You know, I never feel like I have to work. Like it's
Yeah.
one of these things I
You
never
get paid to
feel-
have fun?
Yeah, well, I don't get paid that much though. That's my boss is kind of terrible. So
So you don't get paid very much to have fun.
yeah,
Got it.
but still,
Okay.
it's you know it's a great lifestyle.
And there's a certain 24-hour life cycle because you milk twice a day.
Yeah, but I really thrive on that. I like knowing that I'm going to be
Schedule.
Yeah, I know at 6:00 tomorrow morning exactly where I'm going to be, and at
Yeah.
5:00 tonight exactly where I'm going to be. I really like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That
So
is
tell
good.
us about the real stars, your Jersey cows. Do they all? Is it true they all have different personalities?
They do. Each of them are a little bit. They're like a little bit different, and they're beautiful and they're lovely. The Jerseys are known to be docile, and they have those beautiful eyelashes, and they're tiny, and they're just cute. And these girls are so funny because when I first bought this group of cows, they all looked exactly the same to me.
To you, right, at first.
Yeah, and I
Right.
thought, I'm never going to be able to tell these
Yes.
girls apart. And now they are so they're so themselves.
Yeah.
Like Gertrude loves to eat, you know, and she's my little pig. One day she was having a baby, and it was this huge bull calf. And my dad and it took both of us to try to pull it out. And, you know, we're pulling an animal out of this cow.
Honest to
And she's
goodness.
like, oh, hold on, I'm just
I'm
gonna eat some more
hungry.
grass. And she was like walking around grazing, and we're behind her pulling
It's
her
halfway
baby
out.
Yeah, and then we got it out, and she kind of like looks at it, and she's like, oh, neat. Munch, 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 munch. And that's just her, you know, and that's how she has to leave the barn every day. She's going to go eat everybody else's grain up on the way out. And she's just, and she doesn't apologize for it. She's
No.
like, that's who I am.
It's the way I am.
Yeah, and
It's healthcare in this country now.
Yeah,
You
that's
have to
the way
keep
it is.
grazing while you're having a baby. Well, I think I wonder if there's also another dynamic, is that being a woman running this slumber party, you know,
Pajama
is that-
party.
and I'm
Yeah.
sure they know that Inga's a woman, that
I
they're
wonder.
being cared by a
I know.
woman. That, I mean, at some level, I think animals are much more smarter than we are, because they have that intuitive sense that, you know, we haven't lost because of this thing called evolution, that they really haven't evolved that much. So do you see this kind of like conversation you have with the Jerseys, that you don't have to use words, but you know how they're feeling, they know how you're feeling?
Absolutely, and it's traditionally women were always the milkmaids. They were the ones who
Right.
milked the cows and made the cheese.
It is true.
For the whole span of history. It's only been recently that men have kind of taken over that position of milking the cows. And one thing about women, it's been proven that they're better at milking too, because they're more, you know, it's like
It's
they're
us.
You
We
got the
know.
same hardware.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's software.
yeah. So
But we are gentler.
yeah,
right.
gentle hands, gentle, warm hands. So, I know when we were growing up and my dad would hire people to come in and do relief milkings, he would always find women because he said they're just better at dealing with the
Right.
animals, and they're softer, and they're just, I mean, you know, I think it's true. I like to think.
What do you think about? And this is going off topic. We can come back in a minute, but the influx or the increase of women in farming, especially in Wisconsin. What are you seeing?
I think it's amazing. I think it's the fastest growing sector in agriculture is women farmers,
Incredible.
which I think is amazing. But also, here's the thing. I grew up in a dairy farm community. It wasn't like it was just the men out there milking cows.
Right.
It was, you know, my neighbor down the road here, she gets up, feeds calves every day, goes into town, works, gets the health insurance, makes the money, comes back, feeds the
them in
cows.
the evening.
You know,
Right.
the other neighbor lady is out combining corn. Women have been so involved in agriculture forever, but it's like no one talked about it.
Yes.
It was never like, you never got a group of women sitting around having coffee and saying, oh, yeah, hard day today, you know, because they're all out there doing it while their
Right.
husbands are sitting around drinking coffee.
You're right.
So I
Hey, wait a minute, I resemble that comment.
But I think it's great. But I think it's great now that
There's
women
more
are being
awareness.
celebrated for what they're doing,
Sure.
and they're being seen as in this role of we're farm owners now.
Right.
We're taking over our family farms instead of like my dad offered this farm to my brothers before he offered
Right.
it to me. Thank you, Dad. But you know they didn't want to.
Should we talk about that?
We'll talk about that in therapy next
Okay,
week.
okay.
Just by Rick, just word to the wise. It's going to be Inga that will be wiping the drool off of your face
not
someday.
your son.
Not your son's. So word to the wise, take good care of her.
She does that after a lot of Jameson.
Yeah.
Already.
Already.
I noticed a bucket of Leinenkugel outside the
And
door.
New Glarus.
Yeah.
Oh, they've got good taste in beer.
I'm glad you're
Also,
you
I
have your
think
priorities.
that as we've been writing the shows, we haven't been looking for women producers, but there's a dominance of small-scale women farmers. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, who are thinking outside of the box.
Yes.
And figuring out how to do things differently because they want to see how they can make a living on the land.
Yep.
And it's great. When I first started farming, a lot of people were saying, well, how can you really be a dairy farmer if you don't have a husband?
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was like, wow, what year is it? I'm sorry.
Right. Excuse me.
I thought I just moved to a different state, not a different era.
And generation, really.
Yeah. But I was lucky enough where my parents never, it was never an issue. They never said, oh, well, this is going to be different because you're a woman.
Right.
It was never, like, my parents taught me and my brothers, we could do anything that we wanted. If
That's
my brothers
awesome.
wanted to be a hairdresser, they could be a hairdresser.
Right.
It was never an issue. So I think that I was really fortunate to have that in my life so that the transition of becoming this woman dairy
It's a natural
farmer,
progression.
It was a natural progression. So I was very lucky.
Yeah.
One of the things that Claudia and I often talk about is the effects of living in large metropolitan cities, Chicago, Milwaukee, Green Bay, Madison. And, these kids don't get this experience. And have you seen more interest in education to actually teach kids where their food comes from?
Yes. I think it's a growing trend right now, wanting to know
That was
where
a very
your
good
food's coming
pun, by
from.
the way.
It's a growing trend.
It was excellent. That was excellent.
It's a growing trend.
I think that was an organic joke.
So I think that people want to know where their food's coming from, and there's a whole generation. I see my friends who they're sending their kids to Montessori schools, and they have me come in and see the gardens
Right.
and all this stuff. And so I think that these kids are going to be growing up with already knowing what a CSA box is.
Right.
They're going to already know that they're going to go down to the farm down here and pick up all their pork. So it's going to be exciting to see that generation growing up where it's the foods, they're not going to be thinking local food. They're not going to be thinking organic food. They're just going to be like, this is our food system.
Right.
This is what we grew up with.
Right.
Just like...
They don't have to think about it. It's just an is for
It's
them.
just an is. So
What
it'll be
about
interesting.
the kids then taking it a step further as the generations proceed? So I know that a lot of the reason, I shouldn't say I know this, but I think that some of the reason that women are being more celebrated, as you said, in the farming industry is that generation after generation, some of the people are leaving farming, and we can't do that. We can't lose our farms. So do you see a way to entice maybe urban kids that don't have any idea of what goes on on a farm, living on a farm, milking a cow, growing the organic vegetables? Are there internship programs or things that you can bring these kids to that maybe you'll be able to grab a passion from an urban environment that was untapped before?
There's a ton of internship opportunities available to younger people now through woofing. I don't know if you guys have heard of woofing. You can go around the world learning about different agriculture and staying on farms. And I think I was signed up to be a host for one. I think it's called Grow Organic or something.com. And so you can find different farms what you're interested in, and then go stay with those farms, work on the farm, and really have a hands-on experience learning it. And I think it's great. Like I really encourage. I love farming. It's what my passion is. But I also would encourage, I think it would be great if we could take these farm kids now that are saying, how do I take over my family farm when I graduate high school?
Right.
Or how do I go out and buy my piece of land? Who already have this ability to...
The knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, they can fix a tractor when they're 15.
Yeah, those are big things.
They know how to milk cows. They know how to fix things when they're broken. They know what to plant. Take these kids who already have this passion and this knowledge and be able to help them get on the land. And that's just because I'm in the country. This is where my heart is, and that's what I think about every day.
Well, those are good points too, because they have a lot of that base knowledge under their belt, and that really would be so maybe the idea is to try to help them be able to continue their knowledge with farming,
Yes.
and love it, and continue the passion.
Well, agritourism,
Yeah.
and I just attended a seminar
You did.
in Sturgeon Bay about agritourism in Wisconsin, and it's really becoming quite popular through renting out a bed and breakfast, and then instead of having the food 100 miles from your table, it's 100 feet.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the show Around the Farm Table, tell us a little bit about what was the genesis of that and what type of show. So in a way, we're interviewing the interviewer today.
Yeah.
So you're on the other side of the microphone, young lady. So now you have to tell us your story and how did this show start?
So Around the Farm Table is a food and farming adventure. My father and I, we're really excited about the diversity of agriculture here in Wisconsin after moving here, seeing the diversity on farms, seeing just the passion of these farmers that are out there working their butts off and just making the best food. And they're all saying, how do we make better soil so we can make healthier food? And we also understood the struggle of having that small farm with that value-added product and then trying to go sell it to people.
Yes.
Trying to put your brand in a food co-op. And then what's going to be? Why are people going to pick
yours
bed of
over
lettuce
somebody else's?
Somebody else's. But I felt like if they knew the story about it, then people would be more compelled to buy your product. So my dad and I were talking about it, and we were watching these British shows, The Two Fat Ladies. I don't know if you
I love that show.
Yeah. And my dad says,
If they can do it.
We can do that.
And there was another show we watched where it was like the chef quit his job and he started farming, and he was like kind of teaching himself how to farm. And my dad says, there's all these food shows, but it's like these chefs who are so far removed from farming that are hosting these. And he's like, we got to do our own show, and you're going to host it as a farmer, and you're going to learn how to cook, and we're just going to do a show. And so we did. And another, like I said before, like I was really fortunate to grow up with my parents always saying, you can do whatever
anything.
you want.
Right.
So people say like, well, how did you just all of a sudden start a television series? Because I never thought we couldn't do it.
Right.
It just seemed like such a natural thing for us
Dad
to do.
said we should do that. I said, sure.
So we did. So and what we do is we start out at my small farm here, and we talk to people about what's happening on my dairy farm. So maybe a cow's calving, or maybe we're breeding a cow, or spreading manure, fixing fence, so that people can see what's happening every day on my farm here. And then we pack up and we take off around Wisconsin to other farms, gather up ingredients, come back to the
It's always
farmhouse.
fun.
Yeah, and cook up a meal around the farm table.
Speaking of cooking up a meal, young lady, you could cook
You're
up a pretty
really-
mean meal.
So you said you had to learn to cook, really?
I grew up, we always cooked.
Okay.
My family we love cooking. We love food. We love good ingredients. We love entertaining. I mean, it was, when we lived in Virginia, I think we had a dinner party every other night. So it was something that was
ingrained in you.
to me. And growing up, I would have breakfast with my grandmother every morning, and we'd make fried chicken on Sunday, and we were constantly cooking because we just did. We didn't have restaurants or anything anywhere, and my parents were kind of like, let's just cook all of our own food from our own home own ingredients.
Novel idea.
Yeah.
It's been going on for a few thousand years.
Yeah. And my brothers and I are like, can we just please go to McDonald's?
We did see a McDonald's as we drove into town, and it had your picture with a line through it. So I thought that was just wrong.
Oh, shoot.
So some of the recipes that you do, and Tony and I, our mouths water when we're watching you, and you're kind of like a Julia Child or something. You really
times 10.
Right. You really pull it off like you've been doing this for a long, long time. I mean, you're going to do a pinch of this, and I like basil with this. I like to put a little herbs in this, and I'm like, I'm writing this all down because I don't know any of this stuff. You're fabulous at that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's easy for me to do because I get to work with such a great crew. So my producer is my dad, so I already feel comfortable in my surrounding, and I never take myself too seriously, and no one else does either. So if I screw up or if I knock over something on the table, it's like, well, hey, I got to get back out to the barn in 30 minutes, so we're not going to clean this up and reshoot it. Let's just go. So it's kind of
the time level.
I'm not that cool to take myself too seriously. So it's really kind of a neat.
And that really comes through in the show.
It does. I think that's why it's such a popular show. I think it's because you're so genuine.
I think
really
Martha
authentic.
Steward should take a
Could
page
take
out of
some-
Inga's.
really,
Because
could
I
take
think
some
she
lessons.
takes herself
A
really
little too seriously.
seriously. Her whimsical napkins, I think, are just a little too much for my taste. for the kids, of course. All right, so let's get into this big subject of GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
So one of our past guests was the famous Max Armstrong. Max and Orion Samuelson have been the voice of agribusiness for the Midwest for, ever since Moses wore shorts. Max is a big advocate of GMOs. Can we feed the masses without genetically altering our seed?
I think we can. And I know it's not a popular, well, at least where I live at, it's not a popular view to take.
Yeah.
I hope no one's like standing outside with, a crossbow or
Especially
something.
hunting season.
Yeah.
It is starting, yeah. So.
But I think we can. I think we did for a billion years.
Sure we did.
And so why can't we now? And it's funny. I have this conversation a lot with farmers or eaters a lot, and they're saying, well, why can't the farmers just stop using the GMOs or anything like this? Here's the thing. Farmers will react to the consumer. There are farmers transitioning to organic to ship milk because the consumer is demanding
He's asking
organic
for
milk.
it.
And there's a
Right.
huge shortage in this country.
Right.
So what if instead of complaining about the GMOs or saying, well, why don't these farmers just stop doing it? Why don't we just all stop eating it?
Right.
Because if we tell those farmers we're not going to eat that,
Right.
we want to eat something else, they will grow it. They're listening to us.
Right.
So it's, and I think that we can. I mean, I think we totally can. I think that the technology in GMOs, some things are probably pretty useful, and it must be amazing not to be able to have to go out and cultivate your corn or think about your soil and just be able to sit there in your combine and combine corn all night.
Not spray or not worry about drought.
Not worry about drought, not worry about anything. Not worry about where am I going to find some manure to till into my my fields so that I can have that fertility in my fields. They're just like, okay, we're just going to go spray it, or add chemical fertilizers because we can, or we're going to go round up
Right.
everything because we can. So I imagine as a farmer who is doing that style
Working
of farming,
hard,
it
right.
must be
Right.
like, oh, this
Yeah.
is great. But the farmers that I get to spend a lot of time with, they're kind of thinking more like, why don't we just improve our soils? There's research that shows like, oh, you have this weed problem in your field. Well, that's because you're deficient in this.
Right.
So if you fix it through the soil,
Amending
you're
your
not gonna have
soil,
those
right?
issues.
Like we would do just for gardening, just for
Exactly.
little gardens. You amend your soil so that it works better for you. Do that on a larger scale so that you have good results without using chemicals.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of examples of large farms that use organic practices.
Right.
There's billions of them. And people have just gotten caught up with debt and doing conventional agriculture.
It's easy.
And it's easy, and then you have $1 million worth of equipment just to do one thing
Right.
that's
Yeah.
you can't use organically.
And also look
You're
at these
gonna use
crops that we're growing GMO. Corn, cotton, canola, soy, alfalfa.
Right.
Do we need to eat corn and soy and alfalfa? Like, I know we're putting a lot of this into cow feed too, but do we need to eat beef every day?
Right.
Do we need to drink
Right.
milk? No.
And should we be eating the cows that are only corn fed? I mean, it
Yeah.
just, the conversation can really.
Oh, and
Yeah.
seasonally,
Yeah.
before we had the transportation that we have to get food to market and production, you ate what was in season.
Right.
You didn't have
And there is a
tomatoes
shift to
in
eating
January.
seasonally again. There is a shift
Yeah.
in I think, in some communities where you're starting to want to eat seasonally again instead of, right, like you
Sure.
just said, getting the tomatoes from California or Mexico or something.
A couple of years ago, probably 4 years ago, Mike Musto and I were in Ripa Candida, Italy, which is outside Naples, and we stayed with his family. And Grandpa Silvio, who had to be 95 years old, had a 12-acre garden that every morning he drove his tractor down to his garden. He
Still worked at it, like
still worked it.
95 every day.
20 people a day
He would feed
ate
them.
off of that garden. And the tomatoes that he grew were the same seeds, the heirloom seeds that he's had for the last 100 years, that it was like the flavor exploded in my mouth. It's like I'd never tasted a tomato before. What is it about the heirloom tomato that just preserves the taste.
Well, I think when we're breeding plants, like tomatoes, so a lot of those tomatoes over the years have been bred to ship well.
Right.
Or to all be the same size.
Tougher skins.
Yeah, because people want to have the same size. Everything needs to look the same. So with doing that, we've bred the flavor out of a lot of these plants. And that's why with these beautiful heirlooms, especially the heirloom tomato varieties that we have now, they taste so different.
Oh.
They might not be the prettiest things. They're not going to be perfect
No.
looking, but they taste incredible.
You can eat them standing over to the sink with, oh my gosh,
Same
I
thing
love
with
them.
apples. They
Yeah.
were bred for the look
Yeah.
and shippability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we spray them with wax.
Right.
And then we have a lamp at the produce market showing you how beautiful
shiny
these
they
are. Well, it's good if you want to paint it,
Yeah, right.
you know, but if you want to
For
eat
still
it,
life.
yeah, I mean, it's a
So
whole other conversation.
how much does it cost, or maybe it's not a cost question, but is it difficult to be certified organic? Is that one of the bumps in the road for farmers?
Absolutely. So if my conventional neighbor said, "Oh, I want to transition to organic," and he milks cows, he would have to feed those cows. Well, it would take 3 years for him to
It's
transition
it's some
his
time,
land.
right.
And so he's going to have to say, "Well, I'm going to have to grow everything organically. I'm still going to have to sell it for the conventional price."
Yeah.
I'm still going to be shipping milk for the conventional
Yeah.
price, and I'm going to have to redo my whole thought system. I'm going to have to teach myself all these different things, but also I'm going to lose a lot of money over the next 3
In that
years before I
transition.
can get yeah. For me, I was really lucky. My dad had the land certified organic when I arrived, so I bought a conventional herd. And I transitioned those cows for a year, feeding them all organic feed. But the milk price was $20 back then, so I was able to do it and still survive.
Right.
But like, people say to me all the time, "Well, why don't people just go organic?" It is so expensive.
Yes.
And hopefully one day we'll be able to have some sort of a help from the government to say, "Okay, while you transition, we're going to help offset
Yes.
those costs for you." And we're also going to provide you with somebody to help teach you. The whole healthcare of cows is completely different than my brother's a conventional farmer. And when I tell him if I have an issue with something,
Right.
he goes down this laundry list of medicines that he
Medicine
gives
to
to his
take.
cows. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to give her some garlic and echinacea. Like, what? She's like, what do you do to your cows? Like, wow.
This morning I was listening to the news, and they have a product for infants. It's called D-Drops. So these are drops that you put in the mouth of an infant to give the infant the vitamins that
D.
it's not getting. So I guess nursing wasn't good enough.
Yeah, right?
You know,
Hey.
I mean, so it's
Oh, that mother's milk.
Yeah.
It's so
you need
overrated.
D-drops. That's what you need. And you know, and you could get all these side effects. So consult your
Yeah.
physician first. You know, by the
If
time
you're
you listen to those side,
diarrhea.
it's like I'll take some echinacea and garlic. Well, this is the Going Home with Tony show, and we're here with Claudia and I are with Inga Witscher and her dad Rick Witscher, and we're at St. Isidore's Mead in Osseo, Wisconsin, next to Pigeon Run,
Falls.
Pigeon Falls.
You'll get it by the end of the show.
Let's just rename
We'll
it.
just call it Pigeon Run.
Pigeon
Or
Run.
Pigeon's got the runs. I don't know.
And it wasn't from organic farming. So we'll be right back, and we're going to be getting a message from our sponsor, and we're also going to be talking about the empty calories that we're getting in fats and sugars today. So we'll be right back.
You have to be kidding me. What? Really? No hot water? Not today. What am I going to do?
Sound familiar? If not, it will. Don't be caught in a cold shower when you need it the most. When your water heater's working, you'll never give it a second thought. When your water heater stops working, it's the only thing on your mind. Hi, Tony Scimeca, owner of Hot Water 911. Hot Water 911 has the largest inventory of residential and commercial water heater parts. All of our technicians are factory trained and certified. Whether it's your home or your business, you really can't live without hot water. So if you have any questions or concerns about your water heater, just call Hot Water 911 at 1-800-GO-HOT-WATER or visit hotwater911.com. And don't worry, help is on the way. Don't forget to listen to Going Home with Tony. That's me.
And thank you very much, Claudia. So, Inga Witscher, farmer, chef, entrepreneur. What else do we have on here?
Inspirational
guru
for women.
Very attractive. and she'll cut your hair. Did you ever learn how to do that, by the way?
No, but I dropped out after the first quarter of beauty school, and so I only learned how to do manicures. But I tell people, I'm like, I can totally cut hair. Like, I've got this. So they're like, all right, cut my hair. And I'm like, oh, sure.
Well, I think it was so cool what you did with the hooves on your jersey. They're so pretty.
Manicures on them. It's
That
awesome.
must take a long
I
time.
think red is a great color on anyone.
It is. So let's talk about empty calories, fats, and sugars. What's going on today in this country? Why are we so obese?
Because we don't make time to cook. It's so much easier for us to run to, some sort of a restaurant or a fast food place and grab something rather than come home and actually have ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, there's food everywhere, like, in your kitchens, but like, how many ingredients do you have to be able to make something? And then you have to have a half an hour to be able to put together a salad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us, we get busy and we just don't make the time for it, unfortunately, which is something we should all be making time for and sitting down at a table and eating food instead of standing up in the kitchen.
So it's a cultural issue.
I think it's a cultural issue, but also, corn's cheap. And it's a cheap ingredient, and so that's going to be going into a lot of food.
Is it the corn syrup industry
yeah.
that is just piling on the pounds?
Well, I mean,
Because corn syrup is when you go to McDonald's, it's even in the bread.
It's in everything.
yeah,
Right.
And
they just give you a straw with like
Right,
a
exactly.
cup
It's in
of it.
everything.
except I went to the store to get some corn syrup. There was no corn syrup.
It's see McDonald's.
It was all artificial.
Well, and it's a good point too, because if you buy honey from the grocery store and it's just it's honey, whatever, it can be up to I think 90% corn syrup.
Right.
So-
You have to really read your labels. And I think that's part of changing the culture of eating as well, is understanding what you are serving. So let's say somebody commits to cooking at home. Well, now you've got to take it a step further, because you can cook at home and you can be the kind of person that goes in all the center aisles, which are all the pre-packaged or whatever, and with full of corn syrups and stuff. So the second lesson is to do the periphery, to do the vegetables and the meats and the dairy, and skip the center aisles and read your labels, because you're right. If you don't, honey is fabulous for you, but if you're not getting your local raw honey, you're getting corn syrup.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's so easy to cook well and simply. And if you look at soup or something, like you look at a can of soup and there's just it's
sodium.
Like, geez, I'm gonna have a heart attack if I eat this. But it takes you.
But we have a medication for that, but you will have to consult your physician.
And it may cause heart attacks.
Or brain tumors, but if you can live with that or die with that, it's a progresso.
And things are so making pasta from scratch, so easy. 3 ingredients, and you get good ingredients, and then you can eat those pastas and things like that instead of buying frozen ravioli or these frozen lasagna things that are just chock full of all this filler to make it last. Yeah, why do you have to have a pound of salt to everything?
Right.
So if you're going to put the cow back in the barn, where did we lose it? I mean, what was it? Swanson TV dinners that were the downfall of people knowing how to do these things?
I think it's advertising and cheap food.
Right. Advertising is huge. They appeal to the masses.
Yeah. I remember when we did, I've never really had television. Growing up, we didn't have television, but I would go to my grandparents' house and I would watch Saturday morning cartoons.
Yep.
And I'd come home and I was like, why can't we just have that cereal?
Right. The cereal. I was going to say all the
guys are
Cocoa Puffs.
You have no idea how bad of parents you are that we can't have 3 pounds of sugar for breakfast. Who do you think? Why
are you making me eggs and bacon?
Yeah, right? Oh,
Inga, someday you'll appreciate this.
yeah, exactly.
You have a TV show.
Yeah.
You'll have a TV show.
Now go to the chicken coop and gather eggs.
It's true, though. I think you're right, Rick. I think it is advertising, and I think it's so packaged, no pun intended, that we just bought into it because it was easy and it was cheap. But Inga Witscher, do you see a shift now? I mean, is there a new surge in people in your generation that aren't going to buy the Cocoa Puffs?
Oh, I think so. I think that people are getting more educated. A lot of the folks that I hang out with in my neighboring town here, it's that's what they think about. I mean, they get together and we all cook together.
Oh, nice.
As an activity instead of going out to the bar or something.
Nice.
And we share those experiences together and having these potlucks and talking about where the food's coming from. One thing that I love about entertaining is we can have a full plate or a full table of food, and then we get to talk about where that food came from, and then have those conversations
Right.
happening. I think that's
Which is
fun to
really
do.
what your show's about.
Yeah, exactly.
It is.
So, by the way, what was in those scones this morning? It was like
Door County cherries.
Oh, were they? Oh, I love it. I didn't even catch
there was
that.
like
They were yummy.
a little hint of mint or something
Oh,
in there.
lemon
Oh,
zest.
lemon zest.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm a big lemon zest fan.
Yeah.
I know it's not a local
Doesn't
food, but I
take
love
much
it.
to go far.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
it's true.
I know, but I use it in everything. I put it in meatballs, and I think I don't know why.
Because I think it
obsessed with
perks up flavors.
It perks it up.
I like the mint you put in your martinis, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, can we have some?
Tony's a martini. Tony's a martini guy.
Are you? Oh,
I like the one show where you did with your cousin Cece, and you said, I think we need more vodka. That's the Wisconsin girl I like.
Oh, that's good. What do you? So your cows, are they purely grass fed then?
no, they're not. I supplement with a little bit of grain.
Okay.
Right now, to be all grass fed with the dairy cows or with beef cows, you have to have incredible forages.
Yes.
Because you're keeping these you got
Yes.
to keep body condition on
Yes.
these cows to get them
right.
through these
They have
harsh
to be
winters.
eating all day. Right. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is I don't know that my cows would come walking in the barn to get milked if they didn't have their little treat. Of
Oh,
their
so you
little
lure
grain
them
mix.
with that.
Yeah.
Got it. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's like I just bribe them a little bit, but I do feed only baled hay
Okay.
during the winter, and then in the summertime or the spring and summer, I do rotational grazing.
Okay.
So I move my cows every 12 hours to new pasture, and then I take them off of the old pasture. So
Got it.
I graze them in strips, so that way they can harvest their own feed, spread their own manure,
Right.
get off that piece that they were on, so that can now regrow,
Recover,
and I can come back in 40 days and graze that.
They
again.
are happy cows.
Yeah, they are.
And your cows do eat local.
They do. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. My cows eat around $30,000 of local food every year.
Nice.
Their hay comes from 10 miles down the road. Their grain comes from 15 miles down the road.
Okay.
And then
And now you have to assure that those are organic
they have
also.
to be certified organic.
Okay.
So with the company that I buy my grain from, they do chicken feeds and they buy up a lot of feed from farmers around here. But they buy within 30 miles, I think, of their
Okay.
granary. So they're buying all the organic farmers around here, all their corn and their beans and
Nice.
their barley. So it's kind of thinking about it as like this little local food system
It is.
here for these animals.
Yes.
And it's kind of nice that I'm taking that money and I have to, I got to buy it from somewhere,
Sure.
but I'm glad I'm spending
Keeping it
in my
here.
You're not buying the hay
Yeah.
from Nebraska.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Let
yeah.
them eat their own hay.
Yeah, keep
Yeah.
it there,
Yeah,
Nebraska.
get the hay out of here. So it's kind of a farm to table.
Yeah, exactly.
That it's a local operation. And the amount of fuel that is
Yes,
avoided in
that's
being
true, too.
consumed.
Right.
sure.
So
because
ecologically,
you're not
being
bringing.
very
I mean, hay.
good
Nebraska is a
steward.
big hay state,
Uh-huh.
so you'll see a lot of semis going down the road, and they're traveling 1,500, 2,000 miles to bring hay to a dairy farm
Yeah.
in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you're avoiding that. When is the show, and what's coming up? Where's some of the new episodes you have in mind for us?
The show airs on Thursday nights on Wisconsin Public Television.
What time?
And 7:30.
Okay.
And I believe it's the same time on Milwaukee Public Television. But folks can watch any of our shows if they go to wisconsinpublictelevision.org, and then they can search Around the Farm Table, and you can see all of our past episodes that are up there. We only have, I think, 2 more episodes left to air for this season. It's one of the things is we're only able to do a small amount of episodes. I think this year we did 8, just because of our budget, our time,
Your time.
and
Sure.
and it's
And you also have these girls out in the barn
We gotta-
that don't understand your
Exactly.
other commitments.
I know exactly. They're like,
They
get
think
home.
you're utterly ridiculous.
Ooh, I'm loving the puns.
I got a ton of them.
They get
Well,
left holding the bag.
They will. Which one? So we want to invite you up to Door County.
Yeah.
Because it is really a foodie area.
Yeah.
Well, we're hoping to get up there
And
next year for the show.
Great ag stuff going on there. So between Door County and Washington Island and all the people that are just really so enthusiastic. And I mean, if radio had a camera, you'll see Inga's hands wailing in her descriptions of what she does. So one of the things that your parents were able to give you was unlimited enthusiasm and passion.
Yes,
Absolutely.
it's true.
You know, there's no
It is
shortage
true.
of here at that
You just
St.
exude
Isidore's
passion,
Mead.
yeah.
So this has been a great hour.
It has been.
Thank you very much, Inga Witscher and Dad Rick Witscher, for raising such a great daughter. So congratulations to everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And if you do have any food left over today, which most people do,
They sure do.
think about bringing it to a shelter.
Yes,
They'll
I
eat
agree.
it. And there's no food that should ever get thrown away.
Right.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Thanks.